Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Selma Avdic with the American Marketing Association, and I will be your moderator for today's webcast, which is in partnership with eClerx Digital and is titled A Holistic Approach to B2B Personalization. So before we officially get started, let's just cover some important housekeeping items or reminders if this is not your first webcast with us. So in terms of the recording, this session is being recorded and will be made available after today's presentations. It will be available on ama.org by this afternoon. We also encourage you all to join the conversation on Twitter, and you can do so by referencing hashtag eClerx when tweeting about this webcast. And if you have any technical or content-related questions, please feel free to ask them at any time. You can use our chat area that's located to the left of your screen. And before we officially get started with our speaker, I do want to just let you know a little bit about our sponsor. So eClerx Digital is the trusted partner to the world's largest global brands for creative production, e-commerce, marketing, analytics, and insight services. So they maximize the results of their clients' digital activities and improve profitability. Their phased approach to personalization allows for marketers to grow from simple segmentation to consistently personalized messaging for everyone, every time, and across every channel. All right, so with that, I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker for today. So we have Rodrigo Fuentes, who is the co-founder and CEO of Listen Loop. And a little bit about Rod before I turn it over to him, which is why I know you're all here today. So he is also an engineer and an entrepreneur. And so in his role as the product and marketing lead at Listen Loop, he especially loves data analysis. So I will now turn it over to Rod to get us started.
All right, thank you, Selma, for the introduction, and welcome everyone to a holistic approach to B2B personalization. My goal today is to give you tactical advice from my 5 years of experience in executing more than 500 campaigns leveraging B2B personalization. So let's get started. You'll have to pardon my theatrics, but to personalize or not to personalize, that is the question. Whether it's nobler in the mind to suffer the agony of more work to deliver a relevant message, or to mass produce a campaign that is less effective but covers more ground. So theatrics aside, what we're talking about is delivering unique content for each account or lead as a B2B marketer. Why? Because survey-backed research shows that buyers demand relevance. And this is even more true in scenarios where you offer multiple products to many different industries, and a buyer coming to your website, to your content, doesn't really know where to start, doesn't know how to get the information they want. And so some of the questions you need to answer relate to scale and the resources you have available. With respect to scale, will you be delivering messaging that's personalized on a one-to-one basis or one-to-many? And to answer that question, you have to think about the resources that are available to you. Do you have a squad of 3 or 4 marketers or teammates, or a platoon of marketers and designers that are going to help you execute these campaigns? Wherever you may fit into these questions, I'm going to make today's conversation applicable to you and then guide you in making some good decisions about your campaigns. So according to DemandWave, 29% of US B2B marketers have used website personalization technology, and about half of these said it was effective. So this is a stat that gives me equal parts hope and fear. Right? If we all think personalization is so great, why have only 29% tried it? And of those 29%, why did only half think it was effective? Well, I think the answer here is that there's the big bad marketing monster, right? And really, this monster is to blame for the proverbial bodies on the ground. And some of the issues that we see going from top right down, the most common issue we hear are issues around limited resources to make relevant content. So it's no surprise that if you have a personalized message, that means that you somehow need to create content that's unique to either an industry or unique to an individual account or a lead, and that requires more time, more work, more effort, and that's a challenge for many companies, no matter the size. Another challenge we see often is the issue of limited buy-in from the team. You may be one of few teammates who want to try B2B personalization, but you're having a difficult time either explaining the value to your management, to your other teammates, or it's difficult getting mind share and attention given the additional resources required. If you get past that challenge, the big bad monster will throw the other head at you, which is there's lots of tools and vendors to choose from, differing capabilities and feature sets, different difficulty levels in terms of buying and implementing, which brings in the next issue. If you get past all of that, then you have the issue of an overwhelming implementation, right? Too many times I've heard the story of bought the tool, took half a year to set it up, and another year to figure out whether it was working. And I think many of us see defeat and issues down that path. And then we have a question of dirty data, where your CRM is perhaps mixed with good and bad data, and if that's the case, what are you going to use to personalize? Which data sets do you trust? Right? And so there's often a pre-project that is, I want to get my CRM house in order first. And last but certainly not least, perhaps the most impactful reason why we see marketers fall by the wayside on B2B personalization campaigns is that they still need to meet their KPIs while executing some kind of personalized strategy. And that could be quite difficult to do. So with all that in mind, I really want to focus us on some actionable advice from the front lines that will help you really slay this big bad monster ahead of you. And it all starts with data. Sourcing the data is really the cornerstone of your personalization campaign. Without this, it's hard to personalize anything since you don't know what to say to whom. And so there are different types of personalization data that are out there. The list here is 4 different pieces that I will touch on. The first is behavioral data. What has the account or lead done? The second is demographic data. Who are they? The third is psychographic data. What do they want? And the fourth is technographic data. What technology, products, or services do they use? And how does that relate to your offering? And on the left, you can see here on my screen that I have a variety of different sources where you could find some of this different data sets. And so to run you through it, I'll start with behavioral data. What have they done? I didn't list this because I think this is the one that's perhaps most obvious, and B2B marketers are well versed in it. It's your Google Analytics. It's your marketing automation analytics, where you can identify each contact or account in terms of what are they doing on your website? What content are they downloading? Who are they contacting? Beyond that, you have your demographic data. Who are these people? And the most obvious source for this is your CRM, your own database. If you haven't already, you'd be very surprised to learn what's in there already. So I definitely recommend a deep dive for a couple of hours to see what fields are available, and in particular, what are in the notes? What are the salespeople putting in there? In addition to that, I'd recommend something like Clearbit if you want some more demographic information to enrich any accounts or contacts you may already have in your CRM. The third data type I described was psychographic. This is, what do they want? And for teams with plenty of resources, it would really pay dividends to analyze any sales notes in your CRM to get a deeper understanding of the psychographics of what these accounts and what these contacts really want from your company, right? And this could be further amplified through customer interviews that you could schedule and or support tickets that you may already have in the CRM or your help desk software. Last but not least is the technographic information. And for something like this, I'd recommend contacting a vendor like Clearbit, Discover.org. And the idea here is to query the accounts that you want to go after or the accounts you are going after and identify any technologies that are indicated and correlated to closed-won opportunities in your CRM. So I know you're probably asking yourself, hey, that all sounds really great, but where's the tactical advice you promised, Rodrigo? Well, let's go ahead and move on to that. And here's something I want you all to try later today. So with respect to your CRM, it's the best kept secret out there, and it is the Workbench. So head over to workbench.developerforce.com if you have Salesforce. I'll use Salesforce as an example here. Log in, enable parent queries, and set up a query like the one that you see here on my screen. The select name is one, amount, account name, industry from the opportunity object. And what you'll see is something like this from your browser when you're using the Workbench. You'll identify some of the elements that I chose here, opportunity, the query I referenced. And the output will be a CSV file that puts together some of the different elements from your CRM in one table. And the goal of this approach is to identify some high-performing correlations. For any given opportunity name, you can see whether it has been won, the amount that was attached to that one opportunity, the account name, and if you have this information already in your CRM, the industry. If you don't have it, this is where I mentioned something like Clearbit can be really helpful to enrich your database to have good information. And what you see here, I've highlighted in light purple, is that you want to identify some type of correlation between your won accounts and perhaps, in this example, the industry that they are from. And why are we doing this? Because we're sourcing the information that we want to use in order to personalize a message. So this here is starting to tell me that I want to create some kind of personalized messaging around SaaS software. You can see that that's a common theme across my closed-won opportunities in this example. And so that gives me the confidence to invest energy and resources into a personalized strategy and campaign focused on that particular industry. Now, while you're at it, you can grab additional lookalike accounts from that same table using something like Clearbit and find other similar companies to your closed-won opportunities. That could be a great way to expand the campaign if you don't already have a list of companies that you want to personalize to. Okay, so a quick note on dirty data. I mentioned it earlier that this is one of the hydra heads of the marketing monster. And again, I recommend something like Datanyze, Clearbit, Discover.org to clean up and enrich your data. It really will be a cornerstone of these types of campaigns. All right, let's move on to the actual messaging and the channel that you want to use for something like this. So after identifying the data that you need, it's really time to personalize that messaging. And I'll focus on 3 channels that you see here: email, your website, advertising in this webinar, but of course more are possible. So let's start with email. So we're all pretty familiar with email as B2B marketers. Your standard token-based email template like the one you see here, right? And this is really where the question about scale and resources comes into play. So if this is your basic standard template email, the issue of scale and resources comes into play because there's also the other extreme of this example, and it looks like something like this. And I know the text is small. You don't have to necessarily read it. I'll summarize it for you. This is a pretty now famous email that was received by the director of marketing at Engagio. So this is someone pitching a company named Engagio. And if you were to read through the individual sentences that this salesperson prepared or marketer prepared, you'll note that it's very personalized to the target company. References the CEO of the company and an actual personal note about him. They created a custom graphic for this company calling out Engagio, and even instantiating images of some of the employees from that company into the graphic that was attached to the email, and so on. There's about 4 or 5 different points that really highlight some of the personalization that went through this particular email. And so it really boils down to that question of which one are you capable of doing, which one can you effectively implement given your scale and your resources and the size of your campaign. And so to answer that question, I think it's important for you to do some personalization math, right? If we take this quick example, it'll put us all on the same page. So let's say that you have to spend 10 minutes to create a personalized email, something like what you saw in this example that's very personalized. And that was done by a sales development rep. And let's just throw out an example. Let's suppose they're paid $25 an hour base. And so that's costing $4.16 per personalized email that's being produced. And so if you imagine scaling that up to a campaign that is 1,000 personalized emails, you're looking at approximately $4,000 of additional cost for this personalized email campaign. So the real question you have to ask is, what does it look like with and without personalization? Suppose that you currently book 20 demos per campaign without personalization. And then suddenly with personalization, you can book 30 demos or meetings as a result of your additional personalized content. Well, that math basically boils down and says that for that 10 incremental meetings cost you $4,000 of real dollar cost. Is that worth it to you? Is the cost per meeting worth $400 to you? And that answer will vary depending on your business, on your products, on your resources. Right? For some companies who sell perhaps a $100,000 annual contract value to a very limited set of 200 companies who can buy this product or service, they might laugh and say, that's money in the bank. I would do that all day long. If you're a type of business or service that's more transactional, maybe offers a product or service that is worth maybe $5,000 a year, this math might make you a bit sour in the face. It's not working out with your cost per lead and cost per demo ratios. So this is where you really have to think about, what is worth it to you, and make sure that you can do a test campaign to benchmark some of these stats for yourself. Will it take 10 minutes? Are you paying someone $25 an hour? And you can use those metrics to determine whether this is meaningful for you in terms of your email campaigns. But it doesn't have to stop at email. I mentioned a few other channels. Another one is your website. There are many tools and vendors out there who can help you deliver a unique message to each account that comes to your website using either reverse IP technology or cookie-based triangulation technology. And that's all just a fancy way to say when someone from a particular company comes to your websites, they are detected as belonging to XYZ company, and that message is then custom delivered to them. In this example you see on the screen, this is a specific company, Asia, offering wireless power technology. And when one of their target buyers, prospects, Ruckus Wireless, visits their website, they include their name in their hero title above the fold, in addition to their logo in that website, and really try to create a moment of engagement, something that will cause them to stick around, review more of the content, and spark a conversation between Asia and that prospect, Ruckus Wireless. And I think one of the powers and benefits of this website personalization type campaign is that it can be very scalable. Unlike having to create very custom, unique email messages, which I believe really have to be very personalized nowadays to stand out among the token-based email systems, website personalization, in contrast, can still create some of that magic feeling of personalization with a lot less resources at hand. So using something like a spreadsheet where for each individual account that you want to go after, you can identify what content you want to change on the website, where you want to change it, and then have that run on a 24/7 basis whenever that specific account visits your website. That could be very powerful in delivering that value. This also helps with the earlier challenge I mentioned. If you have a product or service that is applicable to many different industries, and you perhaps offer many different products. And an example that comes to mind is a recent client of ours who sells different locked medical device tablets that could be sold to health hospitals, could be sold to clinics, and in some cases are sold to aviation industries as well. And so the challenge there is, how do we speak to these very different industries about the value proposition for this sort of secure tablet device? And that's where some website personalization can be very valuable in terms of honing that above-the-fold message at least the industry level, so that target companies who visit will receive something that's relevant to them from the get-go. Okay, transitioning now to advertising. This is another area where you could really leverage some of the scale of modern marketing systems to deliver business-to-business personalization without as much effort as the email that you saw earlier in this webinar. So in advertising, there's a couple of different ways that you can go about this. One way is to use a triangulation approach, and that's to say that there are many data vendors that are out there: Oracle Data Marketplace, Dun & Bradstreet, Factual, and many others. And essentially what these folks do is they collect cookies. Every time you're browsing the web and you conduct an e-commerce transaction where you have to provide your email and other information as part of the checkout process, you're being cookied, and that information is being segmented, packaged up, and resold. Many times when you submit a form online, that information is being cookied, segmented. You say, I'm John Smith. Next field, I'm a marketer. Next field, from ABC Company. Well, guess what? You just got a cookie that segmented you into a couple of different pre-made buckets. And again, that's packaged and resold to different advertisers. And so you can take advantage of this yourselves in your own campaigns and prepare campaigns that combine the job titles that you want to target, the firmographic and industry information about the companies you want to target, and specific geolocations where those companies are located. And as a result, you can get down to a specific prospect or a specific account that you want to advertise to using display ads, as these folks browse sites like CNN.com, USAtoday.com. And if you coordinate your campaign, you can essentially deliver a personalized message where you will break out these different campaigns according to their industries. I've even heard of clients of ours who will do this exact same approach, but will focus on one specific account. They'll create a set of banner ads for each account that they want to go after. Now again, this goes back to the personalization math that we described. That is only valuable and relevant to you if each account is worth that much to you. But you get the point. Now in the chat, I was seeing that there's a question about social networks and how to use those, and I'll touch on that as well towards the end in the Q&A because I think it is relevant and related to this advertising question. For now, what we're talking about here is display advertising. So display advertising that's personalized can look something like this. This is some of our own campaigns that we do to some of our target prospects. And you'll notice that one of the first things that you can do with personalized advertising is really to grab the attention of the prospect or the company you're going after. In this particular example on the right, this is a 300 by 250 pixel ad unit that we display from people who submit a form on our website. And you'll note that it grabs the company name and logo and injects that into the ad unit itself, in this case targeting an ad to a company called Hatchbuck, and that's their logo there. The idea here is to deliver unique messaging to each of these accounts and engage them in a light-handed way that's omnipresent through advertising. I think all of us marketers, and especially if you're in sales as well, we've all been there where you could only send the umpteenth, hey, just checking in there email before that feels like it's getting old and not working anymore in your nurture campaign. And so this is where some targeted advertising can provide a different avenue to touch the prospect and account without being overbearing, right? And I think the value of the personalization in this particular channel is that each individual lead or account gets buyer stage relevant content. What does that mean? That means that if the account is at the top of the funnel, they should be receiving brand awareness content. Not necessarily your value proposition or individual benefits, but what do you do? And for what industries do you do it? Very graphical. And if the account is in the middle of the funnel, then perhaps you want to start delivering your ebooks, your white papers, explaining the problem and your particular solution set. And if they're at the bottom of the funnel, now you can transition to delivering content that's about testimonials, your business case calculators, right? RFP type material. And all of that could be coordinated through this type of targeted advertising. And I'll note that that comment really applies to any channel that you use, and I'm really just referencing it here in the targeted ads section. Okay, so I want to transition to measurement because I think that's where a lot of the confusion lies. Going back to the statistic that I referenced earlier with the bodies on the floor, only about half of the marketers who had tried B2B personalization said it was effective. Now, I wish I could go and talk to some of the individual people who were surveyed for that statistic, but I suspect, given our own interviews that we've conducted, that a lot of that confusion about effectiveness has to do with how it was measured and whether it was measured at all. That really is the linchpin. From a lot of what we've seen, measurement tends to be an emotional thing, anecdotal. Did it work? Why? Because it felt like it worked. Because salespeople told me that we landed that big account and they were part of my personalization campaign. Well, I think we can all agree that measurement needs to go beyond the anecdote and into the data. And I know that's very difficult, and I know that people say that. So how do we actually do this? Well, you have to rely on your CRM. There are many different data sources you can rely, and there's many different attribution platforms that are out there that I'm sure you may be looking at already. But I think that the best attribution platforms, and whether you have one or not, the best data is really in your CRM, where your deals, your closed won opportunities are being recorded. And there in that CRM is where you want to create two cohorts, one with and one without personalization. So if you can imagine 100 accounts or leads, and you set aside 50 that are going to receive your personalization message and 50 that are not going to receive your personalization, then track how they perform over the course of one, better still, 2 sales cycles. Then you could start measuring the metrics that really matter to management, such as pipeline creation, closed won revenue, sales velocity, average deal size. And that's where the proof is in the pudding. You could really point management or teammates to the CRM and say, here's my campaign, here's my cohort with personalization. It performed 30% better. It created $2 million more in pipeline. Let's expand this effort. This was worth it. And so this is where I really want to harp on the third bullet point, which is to say, do not mistake CPL, cost per lead, for return on investment. I know that it has been popular in the last 5 years to really focus on the cost per lead, the MQL. But if you start going towards personalization, a lot of it has to do with targeting specific accounts and targeting usually a narrower set of high-value targets, in which case a lot of the mass market analytics like CPL can get lost, and the meaning of their value can get lost. For instance, in a situation where you're targeting a very large account and it has 10 relevant stakeholders in the buyer circle, what does it mean that you only got one person to submit one of your forms? Is that good or is that bad? Well, if you're looking at it from a pure CPL basis, cost per lead basis, you might say that's pretty bad. There's only 100 accounts in your buyer space, and let's say you got all of them to submit a lead. Well, you only got 100 leads. That doesn't sound that great when you used to be getting thousands perhaps in a mass market campaign. But if you're looking at it from a CRM perspective, looking at the ROI in terms of your pipeline created, you might say, wow, I got one of the people from my target accounts to engage in a conversation, increase our score for that account, and it increased our pipeline possibility and revenue numbers. Well, from that perspective, it could be quite good. So just remember that don't conflate CPL for ROI, and measure results in your CRM. And that kind of brings us to this overarching theme around measurement, which is to say that you need to focus on long-term success, even though I know we're all measured by short-term metrics. And so some of the things that you could do to fight this are to create leading indicators of success, which highlight some of the short-term metrics, and then also identify lagging indicators of success, your long-term KPIs. So here I have 4 bullet points. The first 2 are leading indicators of success. How much account engagement are you getting? Well, what is that? Well, account engagement refers to the number of page views from a given account, the time on site from a given account. And there's a great quote from a content from Engagio that talks about before a company will buy something from you, they'll spend time with you. That makes a lot of intuitive sense, right? No one comes to your website and buys a $40,000 product with 10 seconds time on site. That doesn't make sense. That's very unlikely, right? And so measuring account engagement, the amount of page views, the time on site, how much content have they downloaded, how many meetings have they had, is a great leading indicator that your personalization campaigns are working. Now, on the lagging indicator of success, your long-term metrics, you want to look at things like pipeline revenue. For a given time period or for a given cohort of accounts or leads that we're being personalized to, how much pipeline are they adding to your funnel? And what is their sales velocity and deal size? Those are hard number metrics that can really help you sell the campaign and the future success of additional campaigns to the rest of your team. Okay, let me transition now to the last slide before we dive into some questions. And it's to remind all of us that B2B personalization is a journey, and it really needs to involve your team. The most common team setup that we see is an initiative led by a marketer, and they're often flanked and supported by the sales development rep and the account executive, or the sales executive. And then they're often reporting metrics and success to the chief marketing officer or a CEO. And so other than flowing information up to management, it's also important to involve management. In addition, not only in terms of the metrics that they're going to see, but perhaps the messaging and the strategy that is going to be implemented. Because when their buy-in is attached, then the campaign is also partly their creation. Likewise, involving sales in that process with respect to B2B personalization is very powerful, because you essentially have an army of people who can help you write personalized content to these individual accounts or leads, right? You don't have to go it alone and create a lot of personalized content just from the marketing team. Oftentimes the sales team has a really good view of what message should be delivered to that lead or account. Okay, with that, I'd love to open it up to questions. Very excited to hear what you all have to say.
Thank you so much, Rod. Yeah, we already have some great questions, so I will go ahead and get started. So this first one is from Perry, and they're wondering, why do you need to go to an outside tool? Why can't you do a report directly from Salesforce, as an example?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Perry, I'm sorry if I gave you that impression. I was actually referencing going directly from Salesforce. If you're referring to the Workbench, that is a tool that is hosted and developed by Salesforce to create some of those tables that I was referencing. And it's a great way to grab the information directly from your CRM. And I highly recommend displaying the information in your CRM. I think that teammates and management have more faith in something that they already are familiar with. So great question.
All right, thank you so much for that response. We have Nikki here who states, getting accurate email addresses is always a challenge. Do you have any best practices to find a list that contains the most accurate data?
Great question. I think we all suffer from this one, right, Mickey? Personally, lately I've really been fond of Email Hippo, which is an email verification service. You can hit it via an API, and it's a great way to check the validity of an email before it's sent out. Now, if you're already on a marketing automation tool, some of these marketing automation tools use services like Email Hippo and many others to pre-verify emails before they go out, right? And they have a vested interest in doing this because they want to maintain the deliverability rates of their email servers. So check out Email Hippo, and if you have other list providers, I'd also be curious to hear any follow-up you have on that.
All right, awesome. Thank you for those suggestions, Rod. We have Lauren here, and she's curious about, how does ad targeting work in terms of placing banner ads on specific accounts?
Right. So as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, as we browse the web, we're all being cookied when we visit different websites, and those cookies end up with different data vendors. And when you create a campaign inside of an advertising platform, you could basically say something like, target this specific latitude and longitude, which represents the office or the headquarters of the company or contact I want to go after, and limit the advertising to the chief information officer at this specific health organization or big box retailer, right? And so in that way, you can create a campaign that targets the CIO at Walmart in a specific latitude, longitude in Arkansas. And so again, a very effective way to use display ads. And I'll actually tie that into, I think, an earlier question I saw in the chat, which was about social networks. And the difference between that display advertising technique and what you might do on something like LinkedIn or Facebook is really a question of where the message gets displayed and the source of data for the targeting. In the example I gave just right now with display advertising, we're looking at cookies that are being collected on different publishers like CNN, USA Today, and the different forms that we're all submitting when we browse the internet. Whereas the social networks are using the data that they have themselves about you that you volunteer in your profile building process. Like in LinkedIn, I say that I am the co-founder and CEO of this internet software company. And right there, I've provided 2 data points that people can use to target me. So different data sources. And the other difference with social networks is that, of course, the advertising appears only or at least primarily on the feed of the social network. So that's also another key difference when creating and coordinating your campaigns. And the reason I highlight that is I didn't touch on it in this webinar, but of course it is an effective strategy to add social network messaging and advertising as part of your personalization campaigns. If you're going to do advertising on display ads, to specific industries or accounts, you should also convey the same messaging on the social networks, certainly LinkedIn and Facebook as well.
All right, great. Rod, we have Brittany here who wants to know what your thoughts are on doing in-person lead gen initiatives versus being digital or combining them together.
So I understand in-person lead gen being events or some kind of so-called steak dinner type activity. And again, another great channel I didn't cover on this webinar, but certainly highly recommended if the personalization math works out for you. So for Brittany's example, I'll assume that it does, and I think it's a great opportunity to add that channel to your personalization mix, where you could host individual micro events in different cities that you can set up account executives to travel through, and essentially create that one-on-one experience, right? There's nothing more personalized than a true one-on-one interaction in person to talk about concerns in the industry, to talk about how perhaps your solution can help solve that. Very valuable, very effective technique. Just make sure that it's planned out properly in coordination with the other channels. And if you're thinking about it that way, then I think what you'll often find is that your other channels are really helping you promote and execute that in-person strategy.
All right, wonderful. All right, so this next question, I've seen a couple of people actually ask this through the chat, and it references having a small team. So we have an audience member that says, my marketing team has 2 people. How much of this can we do realistically?
That's a great question. It all boils down, again, to that personalization math and what you can afford in terms of not just new capital outlay, but your resources and what your team is capable of doing. And if the personalization math works in your favor and you're going after high value opportunities, then that's where you want to get some outside help involved. Someone like eClerx Digital is a provider that can help really at any stage of personalization to help with data management, data cleansing, strategizing for some of that B2B personalization. So, I think the story there is don't be afraid to get outside help, right? There are agencies, there are people, there are consultants who are ready to help with this kind of campaign. And it's certainly a situation where if it is your first rodeo or you're very strapped on resources, that can help you get 0 to 60 a lot faster.
All right, fantastic. Well, we have a little bit of time left for questions, so I'll try to get through all of these fantastic questions. We have Chris here, and he's wondering what can he do if he doesn't have, Salesforce CRM or, another program.
Right. So if you don't have Salesforce CRM, all the techniques that I talked about are actually CRM agnostic. I used the workbench that I referenced in that webinar just as an example. You should be able to pull similar data from your CRM using different exports and downloads. What it'll do is it'll kick out CSVs or spreadsheets. Really the only difference between using Salesforce and the workbench that I referenced is that it's a ready-made tool, right? And it'll do what's called the SQL join for you. If that's not available, then you simply export all the CSVs and spreadsheets, and you use IDs or some kind of key to join them together so you can get the same view and the same type of reporting that I was referencing in today's webinar. And if you have any questions or you want to deep dive into that, feel free to email me and we can cover that together.
All right, great. And we also have Brittany, and I feel like this will be a tough question for you, Rod, because I know you love data analysis. But she is curious about what you find to be the most effective measure within data analytics. No pressure.
Great question. At the risk of harping on it, I find the most effective measure in data analytics to be pipeline measurement in the CRM. And I think that's the most effective because it's the closest one to the number that management actually cares about, which is revenue. Right? And I think we could spend 30 minutes identifying 40 different data points that we can all track. But the one that really kind of puts the meat on the table is revenue, right? And so from that point of view, it is looking at how individual leads, contacts, accounts end up contributing to that number. Lots of different tools out there to help you attribute properly, right? And don't get me started on first touch versus last touch versus weighted attribution models. At the end of the day, whichever model works for you is really going to boil down to, sure, we measured a lead coming in. They came to this webinar, but ultimately, did they buy? Did they become an active opportunity? What probability was attached to that? And I think that's the analytic that's really the most powerful. The devil's in the detail. How do you associate all the different data sets that you have to an opportunity? I think that'll be a whole different webinar we could do. But there are a variety of tools or processes that you can set up and best practices that you can follow so that connection is there. And it really starts from the simplest building block. It starts with some kind of marketing automation that's connected to your CRM so that when people fill out forms, that information is being logged. It starts with, if you're using Salesforce, the campaign object, tagging your emails, your form submissions with the specific campaign you want to track so that that information flows to the opportunity record. And again, if you're interested in a deeper conversation about that, that's definitely an area of interest for me, and I'm happy to have a one-on-one with you if you just shoot me an email, rod@listenloop.com.
All right, wonderful. I think we have we have time for one more question, Rod, and this is from Gino. And he's wondering if there is a specific target profile that personalization works most effectively with. For example, C-level boomers versus millennial managers, etc.
Yeah, that's a great question, Gino. I don't know about the specific sets you've identified, C-level boomers versus millennial managers, but what I have seen is that there is a difference in how personalization is received in terms of buyer personas. So time and again, I have seen that personalization campaigns that are highly personalized, I'm talking about throwing in the company logo, talking about the school they went to, sending them a mug from the alma mater via direct mail. Highly, highly personalized campaigns. 2, security and risk professionals, not well received. Does not perform very well. And many hypotheses around that. But I believe, and conversations I've had with clients believe that there's a certain hesitance in the security and risk management professional industry and that buyer persona that is very private. Right? They value privacy. They value kind of walling off. And they're trying to protect our company from things like privacy leaks and data leaks and things of this sort. And so extremely personalized campaigns we've seen are either flat or down on terms of delivering value for those types of buyer personas. Right? And that's not to say that they don't buy, of course. It just means that for all the effort, resources that were thrown into a campaign, it didn't deliver ROI for that specific subsegment. So great question and certainly something that I've seen in the past.
All right, wonderful. Well, that is all the time that we have left for today's presentation. But I did notice A lot of people ask if this information will be available after our webcast, and the answer is yes. The webcast will be available shortly on ama.org/webcast, and we also will be sending out a follow-up email with these webcast details. As Rod mentioned, I welcome everyone to connect with him as well offline if you want to discuss your questions or have additional comments further. So please feel free to do so. I want to thank Rod again. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insights with us. I also want to give a special thank you to eClerx Digital for their valued partnership for this webcast, as well as a thank you to ReadyTalk for providing us with our web conferencing platform for our webcast today. And of course, thank you so much to our audience. Thank you for your time, your participation, these fantastic questions. And I hope that everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.